Good morning, my friends. Well, let us begin, as always, by taking a few breaths together. So no matter where you are, no matter where we are, no matter when you see this, we come into alignment together. So if you will, exhale first and take a deep breath in. And let go. Together, let's take another deep breath in. And let go. And take one more deep breath in. And let go. So good morning. As you know, our conversation this whole month of November has been about becoming compassionate conduits. And today, the thing I want to really bring into this conversation is a conversation I'm entitling Uncovering Unforeseen Blessings. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, I've been inviting us all to begin to look back at this last year, to begin to look back at the series of events that have unfolded over the last number of years, perhaps, and begin to start to look from that perspective of 2020 hindsight and beginning to ask ourselves, what's the purpose of all of this? Why? The why underneath it all, the deeper meaning underneath it all. What has been provoked and evoked and brought forth from each one of us by all that we've moved through individually and together over the last number of months or years at this point. And Emma Curtis Hopkins, as one of the sort of founders of the New Thought movement, teaches this idea of our perception is like looking through a window. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or just the way it works, is that by the experience of life, many of our windows have gotten really muddy, if you will. And that the whole purpose of spiritual practice, the whole purpose of spiritual seeking, of doing that deep work, in a sense is to begin the process of cleaning off the window and then sort of maintaining a clean window so that we can actually see clearly what is. And in many of our spiritual traditions from the East, whether it's in Buddhism or whether it's many of the gurus that come from the Hindu philosophies, they always remind us that there is a purity, there is an innate self that exists as the pure heart center of each one of us. And that the experience of life, the experience of suffering, the experience of whatever that we happen to go through over the course of our lives, again, is like layers that get put on top of that pure self. And that again, the whole purpose of spirituality, the whole purpose of meditation, the whole purpose of all of the deep works that we do is to, in a sense, in the best way that we can, begin the process of uncovering that pure self, begin uncovering that one who can never be hurt or harmed in any way, that one who is eternal, that one who is the one who exists within all of us. And so when we think about this idea of becoming compassionate conduits or uncovering unseen blessings, that again, this is about looking to the nature of the universe, recognizing that the heart that lives and breathes the universe is the same heart that lives and breathes within each one of us, is the same heart that is in every individual person. And our ability to express and experience and be the place where compassion happens is mostly about us clearing our own stuff out of the way so that the compassion, which is the nature of the universe, the desire to connect, the desire to merge towards oneness, can come through us easily. That, the whole point of our spiritual practice, of our spiritual mind treatment, of being in community, of doing meditation, doing our spiritual work, is to clear out that channel so that love and compassion can be what comes through us as a response, as a built-in habitual nature of who we are, as opposed to the trigger hair reactions and sort of the emotional charges that come through us being what we see through. And so as in this conversation about now stepping back and looking back at this last year of 2020, or looking at our own individual lives and our whole histories and stories, to begin to recognize that what if everything has been for us? I grew up hearing the Bible telling me that in Sunday school growing up, if God is for us, then who can be against us? And in this philosophy of science of mind, new thought, and metaphysics, I am told and I believe and I tell you that the nature of the universe is for us. That the nature of the universe is towards the good, is towards greater cohesion and complexity. The evolution towards oneness is the call that is driving from each one of our souls. And so to begin to use our perception, our ability to look back, and look back into the darkest moments of our experience, and find how more often than not, those are the moments of our deepest transformation. Sometimes the most painful moments, the most difficult moments, the most charged things that we experience are actually the things that propel us off in a whole new direction, or set us on our course, or really lead us to our healing. In my own personal story, there's this portion of my life in my late teens and early 20s where, the sort of deepest episodes of my depression led me to multiple suicide attempts and, time in psychiatric care and what ended up looking like over a year-long psychotic break. And to my family at that time, and for me, that was one of the darkest times in our family history. And yet, those years were what set me off on my spiritual path. That without those suicide attempts or that deep experience of depression or that break of mind, I may never have begun to ask, who am I truly? What is my purpose on this planet? How can I heal my own pain? And in doing so, seek a life that helps others heal their pain. And if not for that dark chapter in my life, I may never have begun to seek the light in the way that I have over the course of my own experience. Yep. And I really believe that if the universe is for us, if God is for us, then nothing is actually against us. That what if the whole purpose of this life on earth is to be in the process of awakening, to be in the process of evolution, to be in the process of growth, to be in the process of learning how to love through the most difficult circumstances so that we learn how to love even bigger, even better, even stronger. I've often heard it say that comfortable people don't make much change in their lives. It's when we're uncomfortable, it's when we're disturbed, it's when we feel broken, that we then get the impetus, the inspiration, the necessity, the drive, and the desire to make great changes in our lives, and to make then perhaps great changes in the world. And so what if this last year has been a series of unseen blessings that have been set in motion? What if much of the difficulty that we've experienced individually, what if much of the difficulty that we've experienced in our politics and in the conversation about racial injustice and oppression in our country, what if many of the murders that we've seen on the news that we've been marching about, what if all of this is the beginning of a trigger that sets in motion a whole series of events that actually leads to a deeper understanding, to a deeper recognition of the compassion that is necessary for us to look into the eyes of the other and find the one? What if all of the disruption and the upheaval of this period of our collective life is actually the tipping point that moves us towards a greater understanding of each other? Gene Houston teaches this idea that Buckminster Fuller used to talk about, which is of the trim tab. That on a great big ship, like a barge or a great ship that sails across the ocean, that has these great big rudders and oars and all these things that cause it to move, that on the very, very, very back of that large rudder on the back of the ship, there's a little device that might be only, a foot by a foot squared. And that's called the trim tab. And just that little switch of that little piece on the very back of the ship can then help shift the momentum for the entire ship in front of it to begin to take a new course and move in a new direction. That sometimes it's just one little switch that can then move a much greater body out in front of it. and in doing so, change the entire course or direction that the thing is moving. And if I look back at just the last 11 months, I see dozens of little trim tab switches that have been moved. And if you think of our collective attention, our collective focus, our collective participation as the thing that is our coordinates, the thing that is driving us towards where we're going, well, then all of these little switches might be actually informing all of us of how our attention needs to shift slightly, of where our individual and collective work is, so that we can begin the process of charting a new course. And we in Centers for Spiritual Living for over a decade have been saying the direction, the course that we're moving is towards a world that works for everyone. This is our guiding vision. This is our guiding light. This is the thing that we say pulls us forward in every moment. Well, then if that's the destination, then let's look back at the course to get ourselves there. And look back even further to the course that has gotten us to where we are. And see the changes that have been necessary. See the big impactful moments. See the big shifts in our lives, or the little trim tabs, those moments that have changed things for us. And oftentimes see that the biggest blessings come in packages that we don't recognize when they arrive. That oftentimes when we open up the big surprises from the universe, it's like, oh no. And then 10 years later, it's like, aha. You know, and that's been a common theme in my own life, and I hear giggles in the room of the people who are of the staff who's here, which means that probably resonates for you as well. That oftentimes we ask for something because we know what we want, and the universe gives it to us, and it's like, okay, really have to work with this. But then that one thing, that one shift, that one painful moment, that one experience of separation, that one issue becomes the thing that causes us to look at everything a little bit differently, that causes us to make different choices than perhaps we would have before, or begin to look at things that we couldn't see before. There is a something, a presence, a life force, an energy, a pattern that exists in front of each one of us, that is indeed calling us forward all the time. Ernest Holmes says that there is a presence that goes before us, that makes the way clear, that whispers into our hearts and minds and tells us what to do, when to do it, how to act, when to be, what to be, that there is something whispering into each one of us, calling us forward. And let that whisper be the little tug of your vision, saying, come this way. And allow ourselves to begin to look into our lives from a greater perspective, using the vision, using the greater story as the thing that's calling us, and then begin to look back at what we've already experienced and see how much of our life has been shaping us for this, whatever this is. And that really this moment, each one of us have been shaped for this moment. And as I keep saying, there's something that's pulling on each one of us. There's something that's tugging at each one of us that's been either disturbed or brought up or lifted up or inspired or opened. And let that be the place to start looking for the blessing. To look back into the last year and see all that's changed, to see all that's come up, and say, what is this pushing me towards? What is this pulling me towards? And you begin to realize that there are unseen blessings waiting for all of us, and that each one of us has the potential to be a blessing in someone else's life. And that the more that we look for the blessings, the more that we look for the gifts, of course, the more we're going to see them. You know, one of my teachers has always told me that you always know your forgiveness work is complete when you've found the gift in the thing that you needed to forgive. When you realize that you finally have gone beyond forgiving that person or that event and realizing that that moment gave you something. And when you can claim the gift, the forgiven has happened. The forgiveness has taken place. And so let us look back into our lives, into the last year, and begin to look for those places where we might need to do some forgiveness work, where we might need to start looking for the gifts, where we might need to start looking for what we're being given by all of this. And I think it's really important for us to perhaps go back to the last year, each one of us, and I'm giving you homework for the next month as we round out 2020, is to start making a list of all the things that you are grateful for, all the blessings that have come into your life because of the circumstances of the last year. I know that many people have talked to me about how they're talking to members of their family more now than they ever did before when they could just go see them. And there's a lot of little things like that happening. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of kindness that many of us have begun to experience because of the changing circumstances, and that we've all had to sort of reach out and be there for each other in new and different ways. And so begin by beginning to just make a list of all of the blessings that you can see that you are receiving, or that the world or society is receiving because of all that's taken place this year. And then the fun part, or maybe the hard part, is to then go back into the last year and to look at all the things that you can't see the blessings in. Perhaps the particular individuals or politicians or circumstances or events or things that have happened over the course of 2020. And begin to frame in your mind a question of what has this given me? What gift is this bringing into our world? What gift could potentially be available because of this? And maybe that gift may not be realizable for 10 years or a generation or 100 years, but begin to ask the big questions. What shift is taking place right now? You know, I have to say, this is Elisha, the individual, speaking here for a moment. I have, not been a huge fan of the governmental administration for the last 4 years, personally. And I had a great big sort of mind-breaking aha a couple weeks ago that left me sort of stunned for a few days, which was that I had a thank God for Donald Trump moment. And I realized that for myself, what I thought I was seeing was someone who was, in a sense, trying to build a vision of a world that was different than the world that I wanted to see. And yet, as a response, what I'm starting to see now is a Congress and a new government and a whole series of things unfolding in our nation that are looking much more like the world that I want to see. That in a sense, because of the current administration, in response to it, more women and people of color have stepped into positions of power in our government. That we are actually seeing a more diverse, more representative incoming government. That what if perhaps the things that I, as an individual, think are going wrong are actually catalysts for greater possibilities of change, for greater impact than what we see is happening in the moment, and that impact actually lasts much longer. That every event has a great ripple that moves out into time and into community and into the world. And I've had a similar thank God for COVID. And thank God for all that's happened in the last year. Because it all seems to me to be pushing us towards deeper compassion, towards deeper understanding, towards a deeper necessity to ask questions, to look to understand the other. That more and more we're realizing that each one of us has to get out of our own opinion and maybe start learning how to listen to other people for the purpose of understanding, not for the purpose of convincing. That there's so much that is rising up in our collective experience to look at, and any one of us from any side of this conversation can point at someone or something that we feel has brought something wrong into the world. And begin to look to those things and say, but what could come from this? What could be the reflection, the reaction, the ripple that comes from this that is for the good? Barbara Marx Hubbard, who's a futurist, and has a great body of work called Humanity Ascending, says that she had a vision, 10 or 20 or 30 years ago of a moment where she sort of, had the sort of out-of-body experience where she rises up and is looking at the earth, and she's somewhere in the future. And she says that in the vision, she saw that there was a great collective experience of suffering, or a great moment of pain, that, in a sense, was the first time that all people had to experience something together. And it was in that together experience that awakening started to happen. And sometimes I look at this year as, Corona offered the first opportunity for all of humanity to have a shared experience. That almost nowhere on the globe has gone untouched by this thing. And that in our nation, there is much that has captured our collective attention. And that in a sense, there's a lot of division and a lot of suffering that seems to be unfolding. But what if it's the thing that brings us together? What if it's the thing that causes us to wake up? And so let's look to our individual lives, to the life of our nation, and to the life of our planet, and begin to ask, could this moment possibly be offering to us unforeseen blessings that we wouldn't see if we weren't looking for them? And to begin to look deeply into what is right now and begin to ask, what could be because of this? What could be emerging in response? What if this year was the little trim tab that shifted everything, and we're actually moving towards a completely different possible future than we were just a few months ago? And what if that direction is actually towards a world that works? And everything that has come up in all of our faces that we've thought was a picture of what's not working was actually the impetus for change that called us to move forward in a new way. And so, if you will, take a deep breath. And if it's comfortable, close your eyes and take another deep breath in and let go. And so let us together once again just be in the awareness that there's only one thing happening. That one thing is what we call God or consciousness or the universe or life itself. And that the nature of this life force is always to move towards the good, is always to move towards greater possibility, is always to move and evolve and grow towards a greater upliftment and experience of oneness for all in the search of the one for itself. That each one of us has the potential to be the place where it awakens to its own truth, where it realizes itself, where it finds itself. And so let us be a people who are willing to look deeply into what is, to be willing to ask deep questions, to be willing to cultivate into our hearts and minds a knowingness that everything is truly God. That our job is to begin to look for it, to uncover it, to become the vehicle or the opportunity or the place where it can happen. And lift our hearts and minds to an awareness that realizes that indeed the entirety of the universe is moving in the favor of the good. And that everyone and everything is moved by this presence. And so let us stand in the knowingness that our vision of a world that works for everyone is emerging, and that everything that has come before now is what has been necessary to cause us to move in the direction of our dream, of our thought, of our attention. And that collectively we are moving our attention towards a new vision. Let us be the place where we perceive the change that we want to see in the world and act upon it. So that we can always remember that there is a power for good in this universe that is greater than we are, and it is for that that we can celebrate and remain in gratitude, to look for the gift and know that it will reveal itself, so that each one of us can surrender to this presence, to this process, and allow ourselves to be the place where it happens consciously on purpose, that we participate fully with everything that we are and everything that we do, with every choice that we make, with every word that we speak. We choose the good, and so it is.